Attention please, councillors and those that are listening in the gallery and from media. Shortly we'll start our ordinary meeting for November, just setting ourselves up so we're live on YouTube. A reminder, councillors, before we start, when you're speaking, if you please turn your microphone off, speak clearly into your microphone and turn it off once you finish speaking, please. Good afternoon, councillors, council team, those in the gallery from our community, from our media and those people that are listening online. Welcome to the ordinary meeting of the Gunnedah Shire Council for November. I'd like to declare the meeting officially opened at 4:32. First item on our agenda this evening is acknowledgement of country, and I'd like to acknowledge the Kamilaroi people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, and pay my respects to elders both past and present, and extend that respect to any other Aboriginal community members that may be with us or listening this evening. Now I'd like to ask all, please, if you could stand for prayer. Eternal God, our loving Father, we come to Thee this day in the name of Jesus Christ, who is the lover of our souls and the Saviour of all mankind. May we feel His love and respond to it. May His Spirit shine in lives that are darkened by worry, doubt or fear. Strengthen and guide those who are trying to do what is right. Make it plain to them. Make us more mindful of the needs of our fellow men and less absorbed in selfish concerns, that Christ may approve and bless what we do here this day. We ask these blessings in His name. Amen. Please be seated. Next item, councillors and those listening, is bereavements from the 22nd of October to the 18th of November. And we mourn the loss of our community members, Lionel Ernest Riley, Herbert Stanley Sills, Rosemary Andrews, Gladys Joan Craig, and Mavis Joan Knight. If I could now please ask all of you to be upstanding for 1 minute silence as we pay our respects to the families of the deceased and extend our condolences to their family and friends. Thank you. Please be seated. We'll now move on to those present and any apologies. We have one registered leave of absence from Councillor Hook. We also have an absence from our Chief Financial Officer in Mr. Connor. I now call for an elected member to please move that leave of absence to be accepted. Thank you, Councillor Moses, and seconded by Councillor Ford. That motion, all in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. Next item on the agenda is confirmation of the previous minutes of ordinary meeting of council from the 21st of October. Council, as you've all read your business paper, I'll now call for An elected member to move the motion be accepted. Correct. Thank you, Councillor Luke, and seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Luke, do you want to speak to that motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
An elected member who'd like to speak against the motion. Councillor Moses is the second of the motion. Wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
In case I put the motion, all in favour? Against? The motion carried. Now move on to item number 6, which is declarations of interest. We have one registered at the moment from Councillor Fuller in relation to item 8.1, Mineral Limited, New South Wales Law Doctors Network Engagement. It's a significant non-pecuniary declaration of interest. The reason is that Councillor Fuller is an executive of the Gunnedah Hospital Committee. I'll now call for it. Just to confirm, Councillor Fuller, will you leave the room for the determination and debate?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I'll now call for any further declarations of interest in relation to the ordinary meeting of the Council. Second call. There are no further declarations of interest. We'll move forward.
Really, Mr. Mayor, just to check with Councillor Fuller, was it your intent to apply that same declaration to item 10.2, which was the submission in relation to the doctor situation?
Yes, I think I better, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Fuller, can you please confirm that it's significant non-pecuniary, also that you'll leave the chambers for the debate
Yes.
determination? Correct. Ms. Knight, if you could have the record show. One last call. Any further declarations in relation to the business paper? The case, we'll move on. Next on our agenda, councillors, we're fortunate enough to have 4 presentations in relation to our ordinary meeting of the council. Those 4 will be, first will be for Mrs. Rhonda Smith in relation to item 12.1, Gunnedah Basketball Association lease. The second one will be item 12.2, Carols in the Park by Reverend Simon Waller from the Gunnedah Ministers Fraternal. And third will be item 16.1, interaction with coal seam gas in Gunnedah local government area. First speaker will be Ms. Helen Strang and second will be Mr. Peter Wells. So, councillors, just before we get underway and I call our first community representative to come forward, I will just remind councillors that you may, through the chair, ask questions of a speaker following their address, not during, but following their address. The question must be put directly through me. It must be succinct and without argument. So there will be no debates to any of the presenters. Any debate will be left for when the item comes up in the agenda. Thank you. So now I'd like to call Mr. Rhonda Smith to come forward to present to council. Normal procedure is there's an allotment of 5 minutes to represent your position in relation to item 12.1, and then I'll offer the elected members if they need any further clarification and opportunity to ask them questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to speak against the proposal 12.1 on the basketball lease. And I've just got some background information that not all the councillors probably know about. Our stadium grew from a proposed project in 1994 of a single court stadium, stage 1, at a proposed cost of $367,000. Late in 1994, we gained extra funding from the Department of Employment, Education and Training, which saw both stages 1 and 2, stage 2 being a second court, as a combined project, the value of $587,000. The funding for this project was Basketball Association $52,000, Basketball Association Council loan $122,500, Department of Employment, Education and Training $220,000, Sport and Territories $50,000, New South Wales Department of Sport, Recreation and Racing $20,000, Gunnedah Shire Council $122,500, total being $587,000. A quote, it should be noted that if the project was tendered as a whole, it would be conservatively valued at approximately $800,000 at current building costs. This is a quote from briefing notes by Director of Engineering Services, Michael Bryan, for the Mayor at the time, Noel O'Brien. It is probably valued at $2.5 to $3 million today to replace the building. By the 16th of March 2011, Council Business Papers saying we had paid $193,552.70 in repayment of the original loan. Since then, we have paid an additional $31,500, leaving a total of $31,500 to be paid over the next 9 years. This is a grand total repayment of $256,557.70 on the original loan. We also negotiated a payment of 1/3 of the costs of building a new poultry shed in order to gain access to the site required for the new stadium. This was $23,000 in 1995 values, but now you expect us to keep paying ongoing lease fees. How many times do we have to pay for our right to conduct our sport in Gunnedah? Meanwhile, we have undertaken considerable maintenance of our building. Remember, it is the association building, not council, as the lease states. This maintenance includes redoing the floor that was laid green and warped, requiring a costly resanding, line marking and painting. The floor is repainted every 3 to 4 years at a cost between $10,000 and $12,000. Replacing the backboards, allowing for juniors and netball use of the facility. Replace the lights with LED lights. Closed in the seating to meet with our H&S requirements. We have made the building available for other users, including CMCA Rally, the IMAX event, HSC examinations for Gunnedah High School, the annual bird sale, taekwondo, school sport, and nice basketball. So what we are asking for today is a 10-year lease, which takes us 1 year beyond the loan repayment period, with an option of a further 10 years, as per the original lease, plus the lease we negotiated but wasn't signed. 2, given our funding commitments as outlined above, we do not believe that we should have to pay a further lease fee annually, or at least until the loan has been finalised or repaid. We were very disappointed that the previous lease negotiated at the end of 2018 has not been finalised or signed off, and wonder how or why council staff did not ensure it was completed, as we would be not worrying about this now and we would be enjoying a 10-year lease. Since the original construction, we have not sought any funding from council, but have relied on grants and our own fundraising efforts. We look forward to your support of our requests. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. I'll now call on the elected members should they have any questions that they might need clarified before we move on to presentations. So I'll call that opportunity. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Hasler.
Just one question, Chair, to you, to Mr. Smith. The fact that you went through lengthy negotiations in 2018 and received legal assistance, as I understand, and were prepared to sign the lease, why do you understand why the lease wasn't completed after all that effort from your organisation?
I've only just come, I've just taken over the secretary's role, and I believe the secretary at the time, she had more or less dropped back and wasn't doing it. She was moved on to another job, and she wasn't. So we didn't actually have a secretary at that time, but we did have our legal representative, Lorraine Boyce, if we needed to be contacted, and we also, our president actually works on the Shire Council. So there is avenues there to be contacted.
Are there any further questions of Mrs. Smith? Thank you, Councillor. So we'll now call Reverend Simon Wallet to come forward and speak in relation to item 12.2 on our agenda, which is carols in the park. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for this opportunity to do that. Thank you also for the support that the council has shown in the Ministers' Return in the past. When COVID, the outbreak came with COVID, we didn't think we'd be able to run carols in the park this year. But my associate, James Piper, did some research and kept up to speed with government regulations. And we decided with all of that we would come up with an alternative plan that could make carols in the park happen in a COVID-safe way. So what we've actually done is we've submitted a COVID-safe plan to council and changed the essential nature of carols in the park. We actually believe it's a very important community event. And of course, lots of things which are normal in COVID, normal prior to COVID have become abnormal or absent. And we think that holding the carols is one way to actually assist the community in seeing things can continue as normal, at least to give them a small picture of what may be going on. What we've actually done with the carols is we've changed the name of it, and we're now calling it a Christmas picnic concert to reflect the standards that New South Wales Government requires for outdoor events. So Christmas, obviously, because we're celebrating carols. Picnic, in that no food is allowed, although people are allowed to bring their own food. And concert, in that people are not actually allowed to sing, so there will be people performing rather than the members of the audience actually singing along. The plan also involves moving the carols, the Christmas picnic concert, which is a bit of a mouthful, from the oval in the centre of town to Kitchener Oval, because we are actually able to contain the entry. We've set up a ticketing system with a limit of 500 people. We've also employed some personnel who will help us to maintain COVID-safe regulations while the concert's going on. And we also have volunteers who will be assisting us in allowing people access to the site and seating in a way which is COVID safe. We also have the volunteers are actually attending a training night tonight so they understand what their responsibilities are, and of course those people who have been paid know what their responsibilities are. I would just like to say that it's also been really pleasing to us in that when we set up the ticketing system with a limit of 500 people, we've actually almost already reached that limit, and it was only open on Monday. So that's pleasing. We're also really pleased that many of the other community organisations who had previously been involved have been willing to put their hands up and come along and do something different. So rather than doing an item where they're singing, we've got the band will come along and play, some of the schools, and I think the conservatory are also going to come along and do some dramas for entertainment, as well as the usual fireworks, and an opportunity for people to listen to both traditional carols and a newer version of some old favourites. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to clarify, you're speaking for a motion, which is the council negotiate a memorandum of understanding with the Gunnedah Ministers' Return in order to provide clarity around the conduct of the carols in the park. That's
Correct. Yeah.
So, elected members, I'll now afford an opportunity to ask a question. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, so you've got room for 500 people to come along to your picnic. How many people do you normally have attending in other years when this functions more normally?
Over 1,000.
Thank you.
Councillor Hassan.
The background information we have provided on page 100, the last memorandum of understanding in item 2, the council run the event and insurance policy, provide the facility of no charge and provide shared steps being slated signs and markers. With the large number of seating, do you anticipate we would need to supply any chairs apart from what are already there?
at Kitchener Oval. People will be seated actually in sections on the ground. So as it's a picnic, we're expecting that people will bring picnic rugs if they want to sit on the ground or their own chairs. I'm not aware of a specific request at this stage from the council for chairs.
Any further questions, councillors? Thank you, Mr. Hall. We'll now move on to our next presenter in relation to item 16.1, extraction of coal seam gas in Gunnedah local government area. And I'll invite Ms. Armstrong to come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Gunnedah Shire councillors, for the opportunity to speak at this forum and address many landholders' concerns about the coal and gas industry. Many ratepayers of the Shire have been associated with the prolonged battle over the industry across the Brook Lanes. Starting in 2008, when Santos just appeared into our communities to commence exploration of the coal seam gas, seeking to establish gas fields across our beautiful, tranquil and productive landscape. Many landholders felt very uneasy with the proposed activity on our agricultural businesses, particularly when looking towards our northern neighbours in Queensland to see the expansion of coal seam gas across vast areas of Roma and Chinchilla. In Queensland, coal seam gas fields have led to 127 water bores being drawn down, with a total of 574 predicted to run dry over the coming years. For every job in Queensland gas industry, it removes 1.8 jobs from agriculture and 0.9 jobs from the service sector. The resulting industrialisation of farmland for those unfortunate Queenslanders left us in no doubt that such an expansion on the Liverpool Plains would destroy farming as we know it. The traffic, drilling and construction of wells, pipelines, roads, massive holding ponds and other infrastructure would alter our normal farming practices, making our family farming businesses unviable. The Liverpool Plains is one of the most significant agricultural areas in the world. The alluvial floodplains and surrounding slopes are well documented as productive cropping and grazing lands. Our deep black versatile soils are famous for their water retention qualities, which are invaluable in producing crops yielding 40% above the national average, allowing rain-grown winter and summer crop rotations. And during this relentless drought, crops have been harvested with very little rain. Some within our region are totally reliant on groundwater from shallow aquifers and those of the Gunnedah Oxley Basin under the Liverpool Plains. When the Narrabri Gas Project was referred to the federal government under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, Santos' own state application stated, quote, assessment of the project indicates that the duration and the wider geographic extent of the depressurisation of groundwater head within the coal seams and adjacent strata will cause a significant impact to the groundwater resources of the Gunnedah Oxley Basin. Santos have stated that the impacts of just the Narrabri project on the Gunnedah Oxley Basin water, quote, can be adequately managed through monitoring and adaptive management, unquote. Yet the advice from the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment Water is that Santos' proposed groundwater monitoring network in the Gunnedah Oxley Basin is not adequate to achieve this. Available public liability insurance for those that host coal seam gas activities is a major issue. IAG, Australia's largest insurer and the main farm policy insurance through its subsidiaries, Wi-Fi and CGU, have stated they will not renew policies or undertake new policies for anyone hosting coal seam gas activities, leaving landholders to bear the risk. Our family businesses within this great community could be rendered worthless at no fault of our own. Santos has a very poor compliance record with the North Western New South Wales. In 2014, it was found guilty on 4 counts of failing to comply with conditions of its petroleum exploration licence, and it has been fined multiple times for spills and aquifer contamination. There is a dead zone in the Pilliga which is still unremediated 10 years later. During the Independent Public Commission IPC hearings
We heard from many speakers, including the Director of Resource Assessments in New South Wales, David Keto, who clearly stated to the public hearing that the Narrabri gas project was not expected to bring down gas prices at all. In 2017, the project's environmental impact statement received 23,000 written public submissions, and 97% of those submissions were objections. In July this year, the RPC hearing received over 11,000 written submissions, and over 95 of those submissions were objections, and that was including coming from the President of the New South Wales Farmers Association and the CEO of CWA New South Wales. Commencing in 2012, landholders across more than 3 million hectares of northwest New South Wales declared they don't want to live in a gas field. In 2018, a door knock conducted at Narrabri homes, only 28 respondents who supported the project. The Narrabri gas project is now the most contentious state significant development in the history of New South Wales. No matter how it is analysed, the Narrabri gas project has only limited support and a high level of opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strang. I'll now ask the elected members, do you have any questions, please? Councillor O'Keefe.
I can work out how to turn my microphone on through. Mr. Mayor, Ms. Strang, thanks for coming. Great to hear from you as always. A couple of questions. You quoted early in your comments some loss of job figures related to CSG. Are you able to provide us
Yeah, I've actually,
where those figures come from?
I have got, thank you, I've got a little brochure here actually that has that sort of information in it, which I thought you might like this. See? It's well documented. All the information I've given today is all documented public information. It's nothing I've made up. It's all been researched and it's all fully documented.
So for just note, for the record, the brochure provided is from the North West Alliance, which I'm not personally familiar with, but I assume is essentially, for lack of a better term, a lobby group around the gas industry. And it actually does quite, that's answered my second question. So I was going to ask you a question about the dead zone in Pilliga, but that's referenced in this document and comes from an EPA website address as its reference. Yeah, no, I found lots of jobs in there.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Do you need any points of clarification?
No, I do have another question. So, Mr. the other thing you spoke about is correctly the natural advantage that Liverpool Plains has over soil and groundwater aquifers. What depths of soils and groundwater aquifers are we accessing for agriculture in the Liverpool Plains?
Councillor Murray, I'm not an expert on these things. I don't have a degree in it, but maybe Peter might be able to answer those questions. Because I can't, because I know, all I know is it's going to certainly interfere because the aquifers in the Gunnedah area are very, very low aquifers. You know, let Peter answer that question if that's okay.
What we might do, Mr. Wilkes, I'll invite you to speak shortly. If you're able to address that in your presentation, if not, Councillor O'Keefe will ask you that question. And it's quite right, Mr. Strang, you're not expected to know everything. Nobody in this room does, so that's fine.
No, I don't know everything, but I certainly know gold and gas is not what we want. So there's some of those.
Thank you,
Oh,
Councillor.
sorry.
My question, obviously, from what you said, I get the impression that if we had a policy, which is what the information is about today, that you would like a policy which is opposed to replacing gas. And obviously that could be one of the outcomes of any policy after discussion with the community. But you did, I think you had, or someone's distributed a document about the Narrabri project, and the New South Wales Farmers policy position there was opposed to the vote, from my reading of the document.
Yeah.
Has the New South Wales Farmers organisation in the Gunnedah Shire had any meetings or taken a position on this?
Yes.
And in our shire, and what is the position that they've taken if they have had those discussions?
I've just handed on the latest New South Wales Farmers magazine, which has given a really good reason why they oppose the Narrabri gas project and why we wanted to have 11 expired hills not renewed because they've been unused for over 5 years, and part of the conditions of unused hills is that they should not be renewed.
So just to clarify, Mr. Craig, if you're saying that's the Gunnedah branch, I think that was the question, councillor. That's a representation from the Gunnedah branch.
Yeah, it's called the Tam Springs Gunnedah branch, yes, which I'm a member of as well.
Thank you. That's answered, councillor.
Yes,
Any further questions? Before I come to you, councillor O'Keefe, you've asked a question. I'll afford the rest of the elected members an opportunity first. Councillor Paul.
Mr. Mayor, could that be tabled in so that we can have a look at this? We're hearing this, but we are not actually seeing that. Can that be tabled, council, or not?
Mr. Green, you happy for that document to be tabled?
The magazine, yes.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks.
I'll now open to any of the elected members, other than those that have spoken, who'd like to ask a question or any clarification. Okay, councillor O'Keefe, I'll afford you one more question.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Strang, are you familiar with the New South Wales chief scientist's report in the coal seam gas industry from 2014?
I am, yes.
Thank you.
Did you want to know why, anything else to know about it?
Personally, I'm very familiar with the report. I just wondered if you were, and answer my question. Thank you.
Councillors, I would like for us to stay very succinct to the item that is on the agenda, and that's presented before us. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate your representation today. And now I'd like to ask Mr. Willis if you'd like to come forward and also speaking in relation to item 16.1 in relation to coal seam gas. And I'll start by asking Mr. Willis whether you're for or against the recommendations.
I'd like to speak to 16.1, Mr. Hassel, Councillor Hassler's motion that there should be a policy on coal seam gas, and I'd like to speak to a policy position that I'd like Councillor to have.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Councillor Hassler and thank you, Councillors, for this opportunity to present. Coal seam gas and petroleum exploration licences cover not only the Santos Narrabri gas project, but extend across 4.6 million hectares of northwest New South Wales. These areas include from the Upper Hunter, across the Liverpool Plains, north to Moree, and west to Canberra, potentially affecting some of the most vital agricultural and groundwater resources not only important to farmers, but in most instances, the towns and villages across our region who rely on underground water alone, often as their only supply source. Santos claim they are not interested in drilling the gas on the Liverpool Plains, yet they are in a joint venture partnership with ASX-listed company Carbon Minerals. Carbon Minerals and Santos hold the tenements for petroleum exploration licences 1 and 12, which cover much of the Liverpool Plains. In fact, Santos has an interest in 9 of the 11 licences across our region. In March this year, Carbon Minerals made a market disclosure with the Australian Stock Exchange, a work program and budget calendar for 2020. In their statement, they announced a program and budget for exploration works, petroleum exploration licences 1 and 12, amounting to nearly $10 million, with a program focused on reappraising their project area and acquisition of seismic data to locate future appraisal wells. These petroleum exploration licences 1 and 12 expired in 2015 and 2016. But applications for renewal were lodged, and the company is able to continue activities until a determination of the renewal application is made. After almost a decade of inactivity, and now 4 to 5 years since expiry, Carbon Minerals believe there is no obstacle to renewals now being granted. Discussion with Carbon Minerals staff last week in Sydney indicates that Santos will be doing this work and hope to commence by the end of the year. There are fresh calls within the ranks of the New South Wales Government, now that the Narrabri gas project has been conditionally approved, to finally extinguish expired petroleum exploration licences over our farming regions. We strongly commend to you the 2019 New South Wales National Party conference motion that was passed unanimously that called for the New South Wales Government to extinguish petroleum exploration licences as soon as they expire. We know our community is strong and staunch in its opposition to coal seam gas in our remarkable, world-renowned agricultural region. We hold grave concerns over the detrimental economic, environmental and social issues that can arise from this industry moving into a region. We have seen these issues here and in Queensland time and again over the last decade. Community members far and wide have applauded the work of local governments such as Dubbo and Moree, who have made strong public statements on the record and taken the battle brought to them, to those in Macquarie Street who need to hear our genuine concerns. The Narrabri gas approval has been a drawn-out process for the community across our region for many years. Some thought the September 30 announcement from the Independent Planning Commission would surely be the end of the CSG debate. Despite extensive concerns and evidence from the IPC approval, albeit with 134 conditions, has ramped up opposition, which is increasing in our shire. There are so many other concerns in relation to the expansion of new fossil fuel developments in an era of rapid transition to clean energy sources. Santos has already written both the Narrabri gas project and the value of its exploration licences down to zero book value. Production costs alone for the Narrabri gas project before delivery via pipelines to markets are predicted to be more than the cost at which the price of gas is sold. While the federal government's National COVID Coordination Commission are seeking to have gas projects fast-tracked, some within New South Wales government are supporting a rapid expansion into renewable energy projects, which are being heavily subscribed by investors and are developing quickly. We see the future in Little Plains firmly in agriculture. We welcome safe new industries that can value add to our existing businesses and community that will not impact on land, water and social fabric. Coal seam gas fields and associated infrastructure would negatively impact on the water upon which we all rely. We urge Gunnedah Shire Council to protect our strong future in agriculture, protect the wonderful assets in soil and water we are so fortunate to have, and advocate for a sustainable future for our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wills. Now, all elected members, should you have any questions or clarifications of Mr. Wills?
I have one question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wills, I'm looking at a map here that shows where coal exploration and mining is taking place across the state. And my simple understanding is where there's coal, there's likely to be coal seam gas, and certainly that's the case in Gunnedah Shire, obviously. You alluded to, I think, in what you just said, that some councils have taken a position on this in terms of taking an anti-position. You can take other positions, obviously. I think you mentioned Dubbo and Moree. My understanding of Gloucester Council, when it was Gloucester Council before it was amalgamated, with a similar position. Are there any other councils that you're aware of taking that sort of position? Travelling through our neighbouring council areas of Pinangle and Uganda, you might have to look on the road signs and that if you're going through the properties in those areas. That certainly councils haven't taken the position, but I believe farming community has. Are you aware of any other councils that have taken an anti-position?
I'm certainly aware of councils, Warren, McGowan, Canal, Barrett, Warren Bogle rather. A lot of these councils that have petroleum exploration licences over them have taken positions. They might not quite be as strong as I like or as the community likes, as Dubbo and Moree have, or Gloucester have taken, but a lot of them have expressed severe concern about water impacts and taken note of what's gone on in the Narrabri gas project and the anticipated and now realised further expansion to other areas for exploration. So there's a lot of councils out there that have been heard, listened to their communities, let's say, and have taken a point of objection at some point.
Councillors, any further questions of Mr. Wills? Councillor Hibbert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Wills, thanks for coming and having a conversation with us, and thank you for the conversations we've had prior to this. Maybe couple of questions for you. You made a claim that the local community is overwhelmingly against CSG. Do you have any data to back up that claim?
Yes, with the community across the northwest, it's the North community, this community here in this district. I mean, we've blockaded Santos before at the Springbridge site. We've got some statistics we can provide further to you later on. There's some all across the northwest studies being conducted, and we've got full research documentation, right or not. Narrabri myself is a concerned resident of the northwest who help ascertain Narrabri's position.
I'd be very interested in seeing the statistics on that. I'll essentially repeat my earlier question for the benefit of allowing the access, and you certainly made commentary around CSG negatively impacting water resources that are used for agriculture. Namely, what are the water resources that you believe are A, being used extensively for agriculture, and B, will be impacted by CSG?
There's a lot of concern over time what will happen with the aged infrastructure of coal seam gas and the wells that are drilled through the coal seams 1,000 foot down into the lower aquifers, which are completely dewatered, the gas extracted, and that's taken to the surface. Spoiled water from these areas is taken to the surface and processed, treated water. So there's a lot of concern what happens over time with these concrete cement wells that go down 1,000 metres down into the soil. Now, there's all these different bedrock levels. They're all quite well described if you do some research. They're not going to be remediated, taken out of the ground, and put back in. They're there for life. So, there's concerns over time that higher water level here could just find the path of least resistance and fill up empty voids below. So that's one of our biggest concerns straight away. I mean, Gunnedah Oxley Basin has been described from the Narrabri project alone will affect the Gunnedah Oxley Basin, our water supply, our water source for many people in this area. So our concern is the further expansion into other new areas. We've already got acknowledged depletion from a project in Narrabri in our region. So what will further projects closer to home do to our water supplies? We've seen in Queensland, bores go dry. Now, was that expected? Should we expect bores to go dry? I don't expect anyone's bore to go dry, especially if it's my bore or our family bore on our property, regardless of coal seam gas activity nearby or another property. And that's already been evidenced in Queensland.
Thank you, councillors. Any further questions? Before I allow you, Councillor O'Keefe, I'll ask the elected members if there are any further questions. Councillor Paul?
Just one question. Was stated at the National Party Conference, is that correct?
That's correct. In 2019, I believe there was a National Party Conference. I think maybe it was in Lismore. I'm not sure. Is that Lismore? Inverell. Thank you. And the party member, I think it was the Boggabri branch, brought a motion to the New South Wales Party members conference, and a motion was passed unanimously by the branches that petroleum exploration licences, once they expire, should be killed off once and for all. Because these are now expired 4 and 5 years ago over our area. They haven't done any activity for 10 years, and I think they can just boil it back up again.
So that's the motion, yeah, if you just want to read that motion.
No.
No, it's fine. Any further questions, councillors, before we move on? I'll allow one more councillor.
So yes or no question, Mr Mayor, through you. Mr Wills, are you familiar with the New South Wales Chief Scientist report into the CSG industry that was commissioned in 2014? In fact, it was commissioned in 2013 and released in 2014.
Would that be the one that would only apply 2 of the recommendations of the 16 and would not apply to the other 14? I'm aware of that one, yes.
I'll take it to yes.
They haven't applied all the conditions. The government, New South Wales government commissioned the chief scientist to make some recommendations in the coal seam gas industry. The chief scientist made 16 recommendations, and had the 16 recommendations been put in place, we would be a lot happier. Only 2 of the conditions have been accepted and applied by the New South Wales state government. So the New South Wales government have commissioned a whole bunch of requirements or requests from the chief scientists, and they have not been applied.
Thank you, Mr Wills.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, and to all of those presenting today. We do appreciate taking the time out of your busy lives to come and put your point of view across. And it is important for our community to represent their position before we do go and debate items for our community. So thank you. You are all, of course, invited to stay and be part of, be here to listen, obviously go part of, but listen to the debate and find out the determination. Of course, that's not mandatory. If you wish to go at any time, that's fine as well. All right, well, we'll move on. Next item on the agenda is item 8, which is a mayoral minute. Councillors, you all have read your business paper. You're all very familiar with the items as I have listed out, but I will take the time to read through the recommendation that I put before you. Ms. Mark, if you please let the record show, the Councillor Fuller does have a declaration of interest in relation to this item, and let the record show that Councillor Fuller has left the chambers. So, councillors, I have put forward a recommendation in 3 parts. The council engage New South Wales Rural Doctors Network at no cost to 1, collaborate with Gunnedah Shire Council, Hunter New England Health, and other key stakeholders to identify short, medium and long-term approaches to address general practitioner shortages within the Gunnedah Shire. And 2, consult with representatives from the Barber Street Medical Practice, Northwest Family Medical Centre and the community of Gunnedah Shire. And the 3rd point, to deliver to council a strategy which will list actions to address identified issues that will be included but not be limited to general practitioner attraction and retention strategy for Gunnedah, and which council can then use to advocate through our local, state and federal members to their respective governments to achieve identified outcomes. Our councillors, this is an issue that we're all living, we've all lived with in our community, and it has been an issue that's just been escalating over a period of time. As you would have read in my commentary, I've had in partnership with the General Manager many conversations with the general practices that are here in the Shire, also with the Rural Doctors Networks, with state and federal members. And that's what's led to the position where I put this mayoral minute forward. No longer can our community continue to suffer through the critical shortages that we're seeing at the moment. The effects are quite wide-reaching in our community. We know that the GP services that we currently have for doctors are under an enormous stress and pressure, and that's not healthy for anybody. We know we have so many people in our community, in our elderly community, in our business community, that it's affecting their way of life as well. We hear regularly from people in the wider region that Gunnedah's doctor shortage is affecting towns like Corinda, like Boggabri, like Toowoomba. There are medical practices apparently that are closing their books in other regional areas around us simply because of the pressure that's coming from the Gunnedah community of residents that can't see a doctor when they need to see a doctor in Gunnedah. I, like many other members, a big majority of the residents of Gunnedah Shire don't have a doctor. It's got to the point, councillors, where we need support. We need intervention from a professional organisation, in my view. That's the reason that I put the mayoral minute forward. That's why I'm seeking your support to have this professional organisation that have been operating for more than 20 years in regional, rural and remote parts of New South Wales, specifically to do what we need, which is to work with council and community to identify the issues and put forward some opportunities for us to attract and retain doctors. We have an immediate need now, but what we need is a strategy that can be shared with other tiers of government and ourselves. So we're not having this conversation again in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. We're putting things into place that we know will be lasting. So councillors, I won't speak more to that. I recommend the mayoral minute to you. I seek your support with this motion. We know Rural Doctors Network are ready. I've had many conversations. They want to support us. They have a history with Gunnedah. They know the doctors. They know our community. They are ready and they're willing to come quickly. So in saying that, I commend the report and I'm now open for any questions. Councillor Hassan.
No, I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Hassan. I'll open for any questions before I ask you if you'd like to speak as a second. Thank you. Councillor Keith.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to speak against your mayoral minute, but only for the purpose of proposing an amendment, which did take the time to prepare with Ms Markey earlier, so councillors, Mr Mayor, I do wish to propose an amendment. There's no change in my proposed amendment apart from formatting it now seems to items 1, 2 and 3 of the Mayor's original minute. However, there is an addition of top point 4, that council update medical professional support policy to include the provision of accommodation for doctors via subsidised rental accommodation equivalent to the current value of doctors' accommodation support, and council exhibit the revised policy for 28 days. If no objections are received, the policy will be adopted. I'm happy to speak to that if someone wishes to second my amendment, or in fact, if you, Mr Mayor, as a mover, wish to accept it.
Councillor O'Keefe, I'm happy to accept your addition of point 4, and I'll ask the secondary councillor Hasler if he is also happy to accept.
Yes, it knows terms. Okay.
Thank you, sir. I will now invite, let the member who'd like to speak against the motion first before I open up for any further conversation.
Questions, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Simon.
Just a question to the mover. How different is this to these the medical professional support policy that we have in place at the moment?
Through you, Mr Mayor, happy to answer the question. Thank Councillor Sloan for it. Really, the current policy relies on the council owning accommodation and providing it at a subsidised rate to medical professionals. This change would allow us to effectively subsidise rent of the property that we don't currently own to the tune of the same value to support medical professionals. With the Mayor's concurrence, I'm happy to speak to, I'm getting a nod. The reason for that, as councillors well know, we've recently, I was about to say disposed of, but that's terrible. We've recently sold one of the properties that we held for good reasons as medical professionals accommodation. So we currently have less accommodation than what we did previously. And so it would be nice to have the ability to offer support through other avenues should the need, hopefully, the happy need arise to provide support soon. Also, certainly, I'd note that we currently own 2 premises. There are only 2 premises available for this. As established in the Mayor's minute, and certainly will be discussed later, we have a need for a lot more than 2 doctors currently, and it would be terrible to see us be hamstrung in the short term being able to fill that need if we weren't able to offer the accommodation incentives.
Councillor Hasler has seconded the motion. You wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Mr Chairman. Like many of you around the table, most of my conversations in the last month or 2, particularly with those of my vintage and older, usually end up having a discussion about this very matter of shortage of GPs in our community and the ramifications that has on them, as alluded to by yourself and in the labour report, which we'll discuss from Mr Foreman. It's not unusual for large numbers of our community to have to travel to other locations, and that's typified by my own example last week. And both my wife and I went to Boggabri after having waited 2 weeks to get an appointment because I didn't have a practitioner in town. But it was interesting over there, but then I took the opportunity to discuss with locals in Boggabri the situation or why I was there. They then raised the issue, yes, well, now causing us a problem because we now have to wait 2 weeks or more to get into our local practitioner. So what's happening here is we're escalating the problem in other communities, neighbouring communities, because we have a problem here. And there are other examples that are brought up continuously. Another one yesterday, a person who has to have a licence check for medical for a licence over 75 years of age, has to make an appointment in Tamworth or wherever to get that requirement by legislation undertaken. These are difficulties because many of these people cannot travel themselves. They have to rely upon friends, or we do have GoCo, etc., which provides the opportunity for but it's not a simple answer. And as I say, increasingly, it's becoming the main topic of conversation. And the point which has been made on a number of occasions, having a first-class hospital, if we do get a new $53 million hospital, is not going to resolve the primary medical care issue, which is getting to see the GP in the first instance. And of course, that's not making it attractive for people who are already living in Gunnedah, let alone attracting people to our community, because medical care is a primary concern for a lot of families, and understandably so, whether they're young, having children, etc., or whether they're aging, and with that aging process comes usually medical conditions which have to be addressed on a regular basis. So, in terms of the addition by Councillor O'Keefe, yes, I, like others around the table here, have been very concerned about trying to attract doctors by buying residences and so on. We've got to be very careful about going down that path, but we already have a policy which provides accommodation, and all this does is allow greater flexibility on how that policy can be applied to those two or what were three residents we had previously. We can now add an additional residence, which is not our own, by utilising this policy. So we haven't changed it, we've just given it greater flexibility in how it can be applied. So I urge you to, all my council colleagues, to support your mayor amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Hazard. I now call for any elected member who'd like to ask a further question or speak against the motion. Just before I put the motion, councillors, one last thing to say is we know how detrimental this is to so many of the lives of the people that reside in our community. But just imagine if COVID-19 had really taken effect in our community, this would be a catastrophic conversation. In saying that, councillors, I will now put the motion. All in favour? Against? I declare that unanimously supported, and I do appreciate the support of the Mayoral Amendment. I'll now move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the General Manager's report, starting item 9.1, donation of prizes for the Swimming Club Incorporated. I'll hand to Mr. Clark to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, good evening, councillors and those playing at home. I will speak for the purpose of brevity to both reports, reports 1 and 2. They're both seeking endorsement of my actions in providing prizes to the Swimming Gunnedah Incorporated and also the Gunnedah South School, Gunnedah South Public School being received for the purposes of fundraising in the form of movie tickets. Please take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Groff. I now call elected member to move the motion. Thank you, Councillor Swain. That's 9.1, Councillor Swain. Seconder to that motion. Thank you, Councillor Moses. Councillor Swain, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
So, elected member would like to speak against the motion. Councillor Moses, do you wish to speak to the motion, Mr. Seconder?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
There are no further questions or debate. I'll put the motion on favour. Against? The motion carried. Moving on to item 9.2, and I'll now call for elected member to move that motion. Thank you, Councillor Campbell, and seconded by Councillor Swain. Councillor Campbell, would you like to speak to the motion as moved with the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I have elected member who would like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Swain is the seconder of the motion. Wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
There's no further debate. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? I declare that motion carried. Moving right along. Thank you, Mr. Groff, for your participation today. Item 10 in the ordinary meeting of council is the Director of Corporate and Community Services report. I'll call on Mr. Foreman to detail his recommendations, starting with item 10.1, revised policy of fraud interruption. Thank you, Mr. Foreman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just a routine review of Council's fraud and corruption prevention policy. This draft was endorsed by the Audit Committee at the last meeting, and with minimal changes, it's recommended for adoption without exception.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. I'll call for a move to the motion from Councillor Luke and seconded by Councillor Swain. Councillor Luke, you wish to speak to the motion as moved?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pretty straightforward.
I'll now call for elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion.
I'd ask a question, Mr. Chairman. I see that the volunteers are now mentioned on a number of occasions in here. Does the director have any evidence of suggestion that volunteers are more susceptible than other members of the community? Because I getting volunteers to organisations is a difficult enough moment without labelling them. I presume it's just including them for other reasons rather than any evidence of that sort.
Really, Mr. Mayor, that amendment is not in response to any particular incident. It's just a reflection of best practice. We encourage volunteers to be involved where possible. Volunteers make a very important contribution to our community, as we know. But at times, volunteers might be put into situations where they don't have enough money. And just the risk of that, as with any individual, needs to be considered.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's about my husband and his specialist things. I've got to take it, sorry. I'll be back. Sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Could you please let the record show that Ms. Swain has removed herself from the chambers and won't be participating in the debates of the next few items that Trish returns. Thank you. Councillors, I'll now call on Councillor Swain, second the motion. She's no longer here. If she'd like to speak to the motion, any further questions or comments, councillors? I'll now put the motion. All in favour? Against? Okay, that motion carried. Moving on, item 10.2, submissions, New South Wales inquiry into the rural health outcomes. And we have a declaration of interest from Councillor Fuller in relation to this item. So, Ms. Martin, please let the record show that Councillor Fuller has left the chambers for the conversation, debates, and therefore determination of this item. I'll now hand to Mr. Foreman to detail a recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors' report provides a draft submission to the New South Wales Government's inquiry into rural health outcomes. The submission is presented for Council's endorsement.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. I'll now call an elected member to please move the motion.
I'd take pleasure in moving that item, Chairman.
Now call for a second of the motion before I ask Councillor Haslett to speak. Thank you, Councillor Moses. Councillor Haslett, please speak to the motion.
I'd only add what I said earlier when speaking to your mayoral minute. I think the work that's been done in getting the evidence particularly from our own organisation's experience is a very good document to submit to that inquiry. It reinforces and provides evidence of how we have been detrimentally affected, this community, and particularly this organisation, by the shortage of practitioners, etc. in the area. I think it will be a very good document for you to use in other forums, taking it to the Country Mayors Association and other those discussions we're going to have as part of the information carried with regard to the mayoral minutes. So I think Mr. Foreman put his efforts in preparing that document. I would like to add one thing to it, unless others wanted to, I would then move going to committee for a while, but I've just got one addition I'd like to see added to the document, where it says on the yes, after in the draft submission, after the third paragraph, I would like to see the following wording just added. Community members who are required to undertake medical checkups required by legislation, for example, licence renewal for over 75, workers' compensation, are forced to travel out of town if they can gain appointment in other towns. I think it's important to add that point to the submission, because it's not mentioned in the rest of the document, as it has been raised with councillors in relation to, and I think it's a very important one, because we're finding that people who normally have to just go and see a GP are now forced to travel if they can get an appointment. And there's no guarantee that they can do that. So That's just one small issue.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett. Councillors, before I open for any further debate or refer to Councillor Mose to be accepts the addition to, as the second of the motion to the submission, councillors, I urge you to please read the addition, the fourth paragraph as highlighted on the screen before you, before we continue on. Yes, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. So we have the mover and the second have agreed to the addition of item 4, councillors. So that is the motion that's been passed. We've heard Councillor Haslett speak to the motion. I'll now ask for elected members who'd like to speak against the motion in relation to the submission or ask any further questions, please. Councillor, before I do, sorry, Ms. Martin, could you please have the record show Councillor Swain has now re-entered the council chambers for a continuation of the council. No, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
James.
Are there any elected members who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Moses is the second on the motion. Which is no, Mr. Mayor. Just before I put this motion, councillors, I'd just like to say this submission is one that will be one of many, as I speak to many mayors and have represented council at the recent Country Mayors Association. The mood amongst rural, regional and remote councils is exactly the same as what we have here at the moment. There are lots of issues out there when it comes to health, so I'm very pleased that we're putting a submission forward to this inquiry. And as Councillor Haslett alluded to, I'll also, assuming that this will be passed and endorsed, be passing our submission forward to the Country Mayors Association executive, which I am a member of, that executive of 8 mayors of the country, regional, rural parts of New South Wales, as they'll be putting a submission forward as well. And there'll be many councils doing this. I'm saying that, councillors, I'll now put the motion. All in favour? Against? I'll declare that unanimously supported as well. Thank you. And I'll hand back to Mr. Foreman, the detailed recommendation of item 10.3, resolution register.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The resolution register is presented for the information of councillors. The recommendation is that the information be received and noted.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Ms. Markey, would you please have the record show that Councillor Fuller has re-entered the chambers. I'd now like to call an elected member to move the recommendation to become a motion. Thank you, Councillor Luke. Seconded by Councillor Swain. Councillor Luke, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion. Councillor Swain is the second of the motion. Mr. Speaker.
Just a question, Mr. Mayor. I guess I apologise if I haven't been following it up. The Crime Prevention and Community Safety Conference that was talked about, we've got a blue traffic light. What are we up to with that, the organisation of that meeting? Can I just ask?
We're fortunate to have the Acting Director of Planning and Environmental Services with us, Ms. Heidel. She may be able to answer, or she may take this as a question on notice, so I'll refer to Ms. Heidel.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the comments show that the conference has been put on hold due to COVID-19. To my knowledge, it hasn't been discussed when it would move forward, but I can take that on notice and get back to you.
I'll now call for any further questions or comments before I put the motion. Be the case, I put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Foreman, for your contribution. Now we'll move on to item number 11, which is the Acting Director of Planning and Environmental Services. I'll call on Ms. Holt to detail a recommendation starting with item 11.1, electronic event signage. Thank you, Ms. Holt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first report for Planning and Environmental Services relates to the electronic event sign between Chandler Street and Tempest Street on Conadilly Street. The report is in response to a resolution at the September ordinary meeting that a report be presented to councillors for the consolidation of information and options for location of an additional electronic event sign on Conadilly Street. The report seeks endorsement for council to receive with option 4 as outlined in the report and the approval of the budget as also outlined in the report.
Thank you, Ms. Hoddle. I'll now call on an elected member to move the motion or the recommendation as motion. Councillor Pitt.
Having moved the recommendations given to Mr Mayor.
Call for a seconder to the, thank you, Councillor Swain. Councillor Pitt, do you wish to speak to the motion as moved?
Yes, certainly, Mr Mayor. Very briefly, fellow councillors who have read business paper and been on council for the last 4 years will know the saga that this has been. And I'd like to thank the officer for the very well-written report explaining all of the options, how we've got to where we are, and it's great to see the path forward that hopefully we can all agree to.
Thank you, Councillor Keith. Do I now like to call on the elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Hester.
Mr Chairman, I will be able to support this recommendation, albeit I find it interesting the backgrounding that we received today. My question relates to the 3 signs, examples on page 82. Has there been a decision made with regard to which of those 3 will be the selected one, or we just the latest being put in as examples? Because I have a preference, I guess others might have a preference as well, but I'm just curious about that.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the pictures of signs are put in there as examples, you're right, and the final design has not been selected. However, there will be a consultation process that we will go through to select the right option that fits with the budget.
Councillor Swain, second of the motion, you wish to speak.
Just a quick comment, Mr Mayor. I hope we're still alive by the time we get to the end of actually putting a sign up there. Thank you.
I'll now call for any further questions or comments, councillors, before I put the motion. There being none, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Okay, that motion carried. Moving right along, item 11.2 is a requested letter of support from Narrabri Shire Council, the Northern New South Wales Inland Port Interface Connection, and I'll hand back to Ms Hoddle to detail the recommendation before you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The report in question is in regards to a letter of support from Narrabri Shire Council for their application for the Inland Rail Productivity Enhancement Program, for their application for the Northern New South Wales Inland Port Interface Connection.
Thank you, Ms Hoddle. I now call for elected member to move. Thank you, Councillor Fuller, and seconded by Councillor O'Keefe. I saw a hand for. Councillor Fuller, do you wish to speak as a mover of the motion?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Our elected member would like to speak against the motion and ask a question. Councillor O'Keefe, as a second to the motion, you wish to speak.
Briefly, Mr Mayor, this project is pivotal for the Gunnedah Shire and it's the right thing for us to do to support and do everything we can to help Narrabri get this up. This interface connection is certainly a methodology to get the train from Gunnedah onto the inland rail. And it will certainly improve the future of our shire.
Thank you, Councillor. And before I put the motion, councillors, I too would like to add my voice of support. This is also not just critical for our shire and our wider region to access inland rail to get goods out, but it's also going to be critical for getting goods in, as we have for our economic development team a strong focus on building a processing precinct, which we will need inputs for as well. So I also like the last comment in the report, which is pleasing to see the Narrabri Shire Council, Gunnedah Shire Council take a regional approach to improving the freight connections and enhancing our regional economy. In saying that, councillors, I'm now going to put the motion. All in favour? All that unanimously supported. Thank you very much. Handing back to Ms Hoddle to detail the last item on the agenda, 11.3, development application number 2020/082.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report relates to development application for 6 Pine Hill Road, Gunnedah. The report relates to the approval of an above ground pool and a deck that already exists on the property. The report has been referred to council for determination as the development is seeking variation to a development control standard pertaining to the maximum cumulative size of the outbuildings permitted.
Thank you, Ms Hoddle. I now call for elected member to move the recommendation. Come on, motion. Councillor Fuller, and seconded by Councillor Moses, Councillor Fuller, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes,
To move the
yes.
motion? Thank you. Do I have a recommender like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Moses is the second of the motion. Wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank councillors by hand, by show of hand. We all need to vote on this one. All in favour? Unanimously supported. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ms. Oliver, for your contribution to the ordinary meeting. Now moving right along to item number 12, and that, or 12.1, that's the Director of Infrastructure Services reports. I'll call on Mr. Bartlett to detail his recommendations. Councillors, you will recall, we had representation from Mrs. Smith in relation to this item earlier on this evening. 12.1, Gunnedah Basketball Association lease, and I'll hand over to Mr. Bartlett to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to seek council approval to negotiate a new licence agreement with the Gunnedah Basketball Association. The recommended term complies with the maximum allowable under the transitional legislative and regulatory requirements of the new Crown Land Management Act. It's consistent with the terms negotiated in recent years for other facilities, and the proposed licence fee of $542 per annum is also consistent with the fees currently paid by other user groups, with arrangements in place for facilities at the Gunnedah Showground. Staff made numerous attempts to have the lease signed, including contacting the association's legal representative to no avail.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Councillors, you'll see the recommendation that is before you in two parts. I'm sure you read your papers, I'm sure you know and understand what that motion is. So I'll now call for a recommender to move the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I will move the following motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler, and it is.
I'm just passing around this market. The council negotiates a 10-year licence agreement with the option of a further 10 years with the Gunnedah Basketball Association, with no licence fee applying until completion of the loan repayment period in 2029. Any subsequent licence fee being based on a figure of $542 per annum in 2021 plus BST, and part 2 remains the same.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler. And councillors, we'll just wait a few moments before the motion is put forward on the screen before I call for a second to the motion.
Through Mr. Mayor, certainly I'd suggest councillors may benefit from hearing Mr. Bartlett.
I'll first, before we do, I'll just wait till the motion is put on the screen. And I'll ask Mr. Bartlett now to give his position as the director.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've got a motion before us. I'd like to see a second before we hear any discussion and debate.
Mr. Mayor, the council cannot accept a motion if it's unlawful.
Please, Mr. Bartlett, can you clarify whether the motion is lawful?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, no, the motion is not lawful as a result of the duration of the proposed agreement. The maximum term that the minister can approve is 5 years under the transitional arrangements.
A question to you, Mr. Chairman. Why was the lease, which was being negotiated 2 years ago, a 10-year lease? And now you're saying it cannot be a 10-year lease. The transitional arrangements, as I understood it, started in 2016.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler, for the question. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that appears to have been an error of staff at the time. The staff that have been progressing this matter since 2018 are far more across the legislative and regulatory requirements. That's essentially it.
Mr. Chairman, I find that quite disturbing, to say the least, that staff in this organisation are providing inappropriate advice, conducting negotiations with an association which has had a 25-year connection with this organisation and went to a great deal of effort to build what is a conservative, probably a $3 billion facility for this community. And in those discussions with the association and the legal advisor, that this was not made clear at the time. And I would like to see that clarified with a legal statement from our legal advisor, which clarifies that. Because we have had this organisation and a very positive relationship in our community for, as I said, 25 years and beyond. Have built a facility which was nearly $600,000 at the time, which the then Director of Engineering Services valued at $800,000, had it gone out to tender. Now is insured for nearly $3 million. And they've paid all of the expenses in maintaining and improving that facility. And now we find that they've had negotiations 2 years ago, which apparently were fallacious.
Well, Councillor, I'll just put you up there. We've seen your motion. We've had clarification from the organisation that it's not lawful. We can't accept that. We do have a recommendation that's been put forward by the organisation. I can't accept, unfortunately, I can't accept your motion that you've been put forward.
Well, I think we should defer. Therefore, I would have the matter deferred until the next meeting until we get that legal advice, which reinforces this fact that really I want that there is a lease period beyond 5 years. Because this is the first time that this has been implemented, and I don't see why an organisation which actually spent that money and it has also spent $23,000 at the time towards a third of the cost of a new poultry facility.
Councillor, sorry, I'll just hold you up there. What I'll do is I'll call for a second to your deferral motion, which will be procedural, and therefore you'll have an opportunity to speak to it. And being procedural, we will deal with that motion if you do a second. Do I have a second for the procedural motion to defer?
We'll second it for debate. Yeah.
Councillor Fuller, thank you. So,
It won't be delayed.
yeah. So, just bear with me, councillors. We have a deferral motion that has been moved by Councillor Hasler and seconded by Councillor Fuller. Councillors, being a procedural motion, I now need to put that motion. So I'll call for all those in favour of the item be deferred.
Sorry, Mr Mayor. I'm not sure, based on the motion, whether we're seeking external legal advice to this. We have certainly been through internal discussions on the matter, so if it's external legal advice, any resolution of council, any motion of council rather, requesting funding needs to identify where that funding is to come from before we can actually proceed.
I would suggest we get our public facilities
Mayor, I'd like to ask Mr Barker whether we have budget available in our public facilities fund for legal advice.
Specifically allocated for legal advice, I don't believe so, but I would need to check that and take that on notice. That said, if there's not budget available for specifically for legal advice in the public facility budget, it would result in a reduction in level of service in some other area, in some area of that budget.
Councillor Hasler, so you're suggesting that it's external legal advice as we see written on the screen?
Yeah, that's correct. And I would like to, if we want to, we can ask for it to be taken from the general fund.
So we'll change that to general fund.
We can't get a definitive answer as to whether there is any funding allowed in the public facilities budget for general fund.
So you have a first preference to the public facility fund, if not the general fund, or would you like to just general fund?
I think what would be best in public facilities for funding if there is some there, otherwise from the general fund.
So, Councillor Hasler, just before I put this motion, can you please confirm that you're happy with the wording on screen?
Yes, I am.
And councillors, you all understand the motion that deferral motion I'm about to put, and that is consideration of this item be deferred until external legal advice is provided in relation to the lease requirements for the Gunnedah Basketball Association with costs sourced from the Public Facilities Fund, and if no funds available, funds be sourced from the general fund. That is the deferral. Councillor, do you have a question?
Just the question, is it not normal, should we talk about the cost of those funds or put a limit on the cost of those funds? Because we're asking for external advice, but we're not actually saying we anticipate that cost.
Well, councillors, we have a procedural motion. We are looking for wording from that elected member who's moving that motion. So at the moment, there is no amount, so it would be left wide open to how much was spent. But it's entirely up to Councillor Haslett as the mover of the deferral motion as to the wording.
Well, as we don't have an indication of the amount that we might be liable, but we all have dealings with the legal fraternity. We understand there will be the charge. It is important to get this clarified, and that figure is not going to be a significant amount given the importance of the issue.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Haslett. There won't be any debate. Councillor Haslett put a procedural motion, deferral motion forward.
I'll ask a question through you, Mr. Mayor, possibly to the General Manager.
It's a procedural motion, Councillor O'Keefe. I don't think I'll accept any questions in relation to this. We have confirmation from the elected member as to the motion that is put forward, which is a procedural motion. It has been moved and seconded, so councillors, or just one more, I'll confirm, Councillor Haslett, you're happy with the wording as seen on the screen? I am. So I'll now put this motion on favour. I declare the motion of deferral has been successful. So that item will now be deferred and we'll come forward to a further meeting of the council. Councillors, next item on the agenda is 12.2, and it's in relation to Carols in the Park. I have put a late declaration of interest in, and the reason why I'll be removing myself from the chambers, I'm not sure, but in past, a business that I own has been a sponsor of Carols in the Park. I have neglected to find out whether we are sponsoring this year, if it goes ahead, and I believe it will. So in the interest of being very safe and secure, I have put a late declaration of interest in, so I will remove myself as potentially a pecuniary interest. And as I said, it's because a business that I own may be sponsoring the Carols in the Park. So I will now leave the chambers. I'll hand to the General Manager to determine how the process will run as to who will chair, as the Deputy Mayor has a leave of absence for this council meeting. It may be a little over the top, but just in the interest of being safe, I will leave the discussion and determination of this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, as the Mayor is leaving the chamber, can I call for nominations from someone to take the chair? Councillor Haslett, nominated by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Haslett, do you accept the nomination for chair?
Only for one item.
Councillors, are there any further nominations? There being no further nominations, Councillor Haslett, please take the chair.
I can do the statement for you. Right, councillors, we have item 2, Carols in the Park, and the recommendation from the officer, Mr. Bartlett. Would you like to add anything further in your report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, the purpose of this report is to seek approval to negotiate an MOU with the Gunnedah Ministers for Sale to provide Carols by candlelight as a council event with insurance coverage under council's policy.
We have a mover of the, council, we've got a couple there, I think so. Councillor Swain on the left is the mover, and I think either Councillor Fuller on my right is the seconder. But Councillor Swain, would you like to speak to it?
Oh, just to say that it's a great community event, and it's good to see families coming together to a night like this. It will be a bit different this year, but then we've all experiencing something different this year. So congratulations to the people who've thought outside the square and found a different way of doing it, but still giving the community the opportunity to participate. So happy to move the motion.
Thank you. Do we wish to speak now as a seconder? Councillor Fuller?
No, Mr Mayor, other than congratulations, I think it's something that Gunnedah definitely needs at the moment. I think it's all right. Thank you.
Do we have any speakers either against the motion? No speakers against the motion. I will allow another speaker forward if anyone doesn't wish to talk. Okay, no one wishes to speak, so no right of reply. Councillor Swain, put that motion then. Those in favour? Against? There we go. Thank you very much. Ask the Mayor to return. Thank you.
Okay, just looks like costume budget.
Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to item 12.3, which is 10 basic agreements for replacement. And I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett's detailed recommendations for you, councillors. I can have your attention, councilman. Thank you. Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to seek council endorsement to reallocate budget. The purpose of this report is to inform council of the failure which has occurred with number 1 boiler at Tambar Springs. The requests funding to replace that bore and ensure the security of water supply for the Tambar Springs community.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. We'll now call elected member to move the recommendation to become a motion. Thank you, Councillor Hazard, and seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Hazard, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Mr. Bartlett's outlined obviously the reason why we need to do this and expedite it, and I think the community of Tambar Springs would be very keen to ensure the water supply going into a summer period such as we're now facing.
Thank you, Councillor Hazard. Will have elected member like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Moses is a second to the motion. Wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
No further debate on the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion carried. Moving on, item 12.4, going about stormwater, and I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett to detail the recommendation before you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. Whilst there are a number of points to this recommendation, the purpose of the report is to seek council endorsement to reallocate budget to fund the urgent renewal of the failed stormwater pipe in Camillo Road, Gunnedah, bring forward the CCTV investigation currently planned for next financial year to this financial year, and to defer the Stock Road pavement renewal project to next financial year. Councillors should note that the net result of that is a shortfall in funding required to undertake the Stock Road pavement renewal project next financial year. It's the intention of staff to investigate opportunities to address that resulting shortfall and address that in the preparation of the budget process for next financial year.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I'll now call on an elected member to move the recommendation to become a motion. Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Swain. Councillor Fuller, do you wish to speak as the mover of the motion?
Can't you just say, Mr Mayor, that it has to be done, it's got to be done, let's do it. Thank you.
I'll now call for elected member. I'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion. Councillor Hazard.
On page 105 of the report, Chairman, in the paragraph, second paragraph, it says further investigation has discovered that the line has been renewed from Carroll Street to the cul-de-sac Camillo Road with 1,200 millimetre diameter concrete pipes. Renewing this section would eliminate the collapse line by replacing it with concrete. So those lines, the previous line was made from, it's been replaced by concrete. I thought it was concrete was being replaced.
Thank you, Councillor Hazard, for the question, and through you, Mr Mayor, to clarify, the section of stormwater pipe that has failed is from the end of Camillo, is in the vicinity of Camillo Road, and it's upstream of the section referred to that is in concrete pipe currently.
Thank you.
Councillor Swain, as a second of the motion, you wish to speak?
No, I don't think so, thanks, Mr Mayor. I was just going to make a comment that we need to just keep replacing all our ageing infrastructure. It's a constant business, isn't it? Checking everything and renewing. Thank you.
Call on elected member who'd like to ask a further question or speak against the motion before I put the motion. There being none, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion carried. Moving on to item 12.5, which is clean up of historical construction materials at block 329 DP 755503. I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett to detail our recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to seek funding allocation required to clean up historical deposits of construction waste on a former council quarry. Staff are managing the clean up within the EPA's guidelines and in accordance with accepted best management practices and principles. It's important to note that remediation should be pursued and needs to be attended to irrespective of what the future use of the site is.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I'll call elected member to move the recommendation to become a motion.
I'm happy to move that way, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hassan. Do I have a second to that motion? Thank you, Councillor Swain. Councillor Hassan, wish to speak?
Well, it appears it's imperative that the work be undertaken, particularly if it's going to be used for the planned park at the moment. My only concern will be, I hope that we don't have any other areas in our drive that may be identified similarly with former waste, which needs to be cleaned up to the extent that this one is. The cost is quite prohibitive.
Thank you, Councillor Hassan. Councillors, apologies. I called Councillor Swain as a secretary. I meant Councillor Campbell. I was looking at Councillor Campbell. I don't know what I said. Ms. Markey, could you please change the record show that Councillor Campbell is the secretary of the motion?
Mr Mayor.
I'll now call for an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion. I'd like to call an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion.
Mr Mayor, if I may, just with respect to a comment Councillor Hassan made, certainly our staff hopes as well, Councillor Hassan and councillors, that there's no further such things that we need to clean up. However, as a result of this, particularly following Alford Road previously, discussions have been had within staff to look at investigations into any potential chance that anything like that may else otherwise occur across the shire. So that's something we're looking to do. We certainly hope it's not the case, but I think it's critical to have a really good look.
Councillor Campbell has a second to the motion. You wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Feel free to take my position, Councillor.
I'll now call an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a further question before I put the motion. There being none, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. And thank you, Mr Bartlett, for your contribution to the Ordinary Amendment Council in standing orders. Moving on, item 13, which is Chief Financial Officer's report. I'll call on Mr Connor to detail his recommendation, starting with item 13.1, first quarter budget review, as at the 30th of September 2020. Thank you, Mr Connor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. Good evening, everyone. Councillors, the report before you is the first quarter budget review as at 30 September 2020, including variation to forecasts, including transfers to and from reserves. In short, there's been an improvement in council's operating results. Of significance, the 4 capital grants and contributions are removed. Once they're removed, it's a more modest, slight improvement in council's consolidated operating result. A lot of detail, obviously, in the attachments to the report, so I'll commend it as stands and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr Connor. I'll call for elected member to move the recommendation becomes a motion. Councillor Luke as the mover and Councillor Swain as the seconder. Councillor Luke, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Our elected member would like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Swain is the seconder of the motion. Wish to speak?
I was trying to think of a really difficult question to ask Mr Mayor, but I can't think of it. No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. Before I put this motion, councillors, I'd just like to say this, our finances are such a critical part of our organisation, what we do and how we partner with state and federal governments to deliver for our community on their great aspirations. If we didn't have a professional team in our finance team to help us to deliver the type of outcomes we're seeing now above budget, it would certainly make our decisions in this room much harder as we go about the business that those that elect us want us to do. So congratulations to the team. A very sound result in some quite trying times in our community. So thank you. Councillors, in saying that, I'll now put the motion on the vote. Against? Okay, that motion carried. We'll move forward to item 13.2, first quarter project progress report. I'll hand back to Mr. Connor to detail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, councillors, the quarterly project progress report. I will simply commend as is, welcome any questions either to myself or the relevant member of the executive.
Councillors, we have a recommendation to you that the first quarter project progress report for 2020-2021 be received and noted. I'll now call for an elected member to move that becomes the motion. Thank you, Councillor Fuller. And I have a seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Fuller, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
I'll now open up for an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion, ask a question. Thank you, Councillor.
Question to you, Mr. Mayor, and I suspect Mr. Conway will pass this one to Mr. Foreman. The Koala Park timeline, obviously we've renegotiated, I believe, some of the aspects of the funding to the state government on delivery of that due to timelines. The previous matter in relation to the works to remediate the site, is that timeline at risk or funding to risk in any way, shape or form?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the timeline extension relates to delays associated with COVID-19. At this stage, we're not aware of any delay that could arise from the extra clean-up that's happening on the site. In fact, the clean-up that's happening on the site is happening independent of the Koala Park project in total. That's something that we'll be doing anyway, and it's, the Koala Park work is continuing alongside that.
Thank you. Councillor Moses is a second on the motion. Do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I have elected member who'd like to ask a further question or speak against the motion. In the case of the motion, all in favour? Against? The motion carried. Moving on, item 13.3 investments, and I'll hand back to Mr. Connor for the detailed recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, councillors, the investment report. I will again simply put and welcome any questions councillors may have.
Now call for an elected member to move the recommendation become a motion. Thank you, Councillor Swain, seconded by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Swain, you wish to speak to the motion?
I thought of a curly one, Mr. Mayor. How much lower are interest rates going to go?
Through you, Chair, I don't believe they're going any lower than zero, but there has been some talk of negative interest rates, but that's how we never actually that.
I have elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Fuller is the second of the motion. Wish to speak?
No, thank you.
No further debate. The motion, all in favour? Against? The motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Connor. Item 14, which is reports to committees. Item 14.1 is the audit committee meeting that was held on the 21st of October 2020. We have a I'd now like to call for an elected member to move the recommendation. Be accepted. Thank you, Councillor Campbell, and seconded by Councillor Swain. Councillor Campbell, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any questions or comments or councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Swain, would you like to speak for the motion as the second?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
There's no more debate. The motion on favour? Against? That motion carried. Moving on to item 14.2, which is the Planning, Environment and Development Committee meeting that was held on the 4th of November. And I'll now call for an elected member to move it if you're correct. Councillor Luke, seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Luke, you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion. Councillor Moses, second on the motion, wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Be the case, put the motion on favour? Against? Unanimously carried. Item 15, Delegates Report. 15.1 is the Murray-Darling Association National Conference 2022. Councillors, you will see that there is a report before you that calls that Council receives and notes Delegates Report from the Murray-Darling Association National Conference 2020 held online on the 14th to 15th of September 2020. I'll now call for a mover of that motion, Councillor Campbell, and seconded by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Campbell, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's, apart from the fact it was a very good conference, and it's first one I've done virtually, and yeah, it was good speakers and good outcomes.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Are you referring to the fact that I spoke at the conference?
Possibly.
I'll now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Fuller, would you like to speak to the motion? Before I put this motion, councillors, I'd like to highlight to you that after the conference, there was an annual general meeting held with the Murray-Darling Association, which is a big body of local governments in relation to the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. What I'm very pleased to tell you, if you are not already aware, is that Councillor John Campbell, who is the chair of Region 11 out of 12 regions of the Murray-Darling Association, that big body, was elected as the vice president of the Murray-Darling Association. So that goes across 3 different states and 4 different states. I apologise for that wrong. 4 different states, and it's quite significant, and it is a testament to the commitment that Councillor Campbell has put in now for a number of years to highlight in the Northern Basin the issues that are there at a local government level through that organisation. So congratulations to you, Councillor Campbell. Thank you for your representation on behalf of not only Region 11, but specifically the Gunnedah Shire and the residents of Gunnedah Shire. So well done. Saying that, councillors, I'll now put that motion on favour. Against? Declare the motion carried. Moving on, item number 16. Now, councillors, you will recall that we had some time ago now 2 community representatives speak in relation to this notice of motion that's brought to us by Councillor Hasler, and that was Mr. Wills and Ms. Strang. So, councillors, you will, well, as you see on the screen, you will know that the notice of motion reads as item 16.1, extraction of coal seam gas in the Gunnedah local government area. And the motion is that Gunnedah Shire give consideration to the formalisation of a policy with regard to the extraction of coal seam gas within the Gunnedah local government area. And that being put forward by Councillor Hasler, that will be moved by Councillor Hasler, is that correct? That's correct. And I'll now call for a second to that notice, that motion. Thank you, Councillor Ford. Second to the motion, and Councillor Hasler, I'll invite you to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I brought this motion to council because, like all of you around the table, we've received communications from members in our community who represent significant agricultural issues on the whole, but other groups in around Breezer area, for example. So it seems to me that this is an issue of significant concern to many people, not only in our shire, but across the state, as exemplified by the discussions and presentations put forward earlier this afternoon. I'm not advocating a particular position to be taken at this point, but I think that we should have that consultation with the community and have a policy position so that we can speak on behalf of our community with some guarantee or knowledge that we have had that discussion and come up with a policy which is hopefully acceptable to the majority of our members. Many other councils have already done this, and our organisation of which we're a part, the Mining and Energy Related Councils, of course, adopted a coal seam gas policy back in November of last year, after a number of consultations with the members, and there were a couple of slight changes. It was adopted in Forbes earlier in the year and then amended slightly later on. And within that policy, it says policy objectives. One is to indicate to members that it supports members in the development of coal seam gas policies that reflect the needs and directions of their local communities. It goes on to say in the policy position statement, the association recognises there are genuine concerns in the communities surrounding the short-term and long-term environmental impacts of coal seam gas as they are still not well understood at community level. Furthermore, it goes on to say the impacts on significant water resources, including surface and groundwater resources, should be avoided and minimised to the greatest extent practicable. Now, that's, of course, recognising in some areas that it may go ahead, but there should be the appropriate measures in place and conditions which will give the majority of people a sense of security of those precious water resources in particular, as well as other environmental factors. It goes on further to say, however, the association also requests the state government supports and clarifies the role and positions of local government in the gateway determinations concerning CSG operations and their impacts on local communities, environment and infrastructure. The association advocates to the New South Wales government that coal seam gas activities should also be excluded from the state's drinking water reserves to include groundwater sources which are used for drinking purposes and so on. So we have the basis of a policy here which we could utilise to develop a policy for our Shire, as others have done. As pointed out, some have taken a completely anti-stance, and that may be what our community wants to do. Or they may be prepared to accept CSG operation in some form, providing there are guarantees. I think we should be having the conversation sooner rather than later. And the issue about whether the PELs, isn't it, the petroleum licences, whether once they've completed their time, whether they should be allowed to be extended, is an issue in itself. And it would appear that there are many organisations representing farmers across the state which are advocating that that shouldn't happen once the licences have expired. It's expired, it hasn't been put into operation. So they're the sorts of discussions that we need to have. I think it's timely. I know when I was sitting in the chair that you're now sitting in, Mr. Mayor, it was quite a regular issue coming up to council. We had the proposals for a site for up to 60 workers out near Nay. There was a lot of submissions, I think between 600 and 700, something like that, about that issue at the time. We had inspections of Santos exploratory sites in the Shire and so on. Since they focused on our neighbours to the northwest, the issue has not been as discussed as much perhaps in our area, our local government area. But the fact that there's significant coal deposits here and obviously very likely significant coal seam gas, it's very likely to come back. So I think we should be preparing so that we do have a position from whence we can speak on behalf of our community and take part in talking to government and agencies, etc., rather than waiting until that time and then perhaps having a lot of controversy which can be perhaps avoided.
Thank you, Councillor Hazard. I now call for an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Kidd.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose an amendment, which I guess is speaking against the motion. My apologies to Ms. Markey. I haven't handed this one up to her, but I'm happy to read it. It would completely replace the language before us. And it'd be that Gunnedah Shire Council reaffirm its current policy position on any potential resources developments within the Shire. And Ashley, I'm happy to speak to that at length, but I will wait for a second before I'm able to do so.
Before I ask for a second, Councillor Keith, to your proposed amendment, can you confirm the wording on the screen?
Mr. Mayor, I definitely in my head spelled Gunnedah correctly, although at times I've not done so on the page. I think that's a Microsoft Word thing though, isn't it, Diane? We'll add that to the dictionary. Yes. I can confirm.
Now call for a seconder to the amendment. Councillor Swain. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank members, assume we have a better than average audience today, based on the fact we had a better than average public attendance in the gallery, and thank our community for being vocal and exercising their abilities to interact with council on this issue. And I note with agreement a lot of what we have previously heard from Councillor Hasler on this topic. With, I guess, a couple of exceptions. It turns out Gunnedah Shire does indeed have a current accepted and adopted policy on this very topic. And if I read you the policy statement, it would be suitably broad and warm in its statement. Gunnedah Shire Council seeks to ensure that sound environmental practices exist in all levels of resource development within the Gunnedah LGA and adjoining LGAs. An effective community consultation and awareness is followed in the various development processes in order to achieve balanced and sustainable outcomes that adequately contribute to the local economy and community, whilst having regard to the principles of ecologically sustainable development. It's a pretty broad motherhood statement, and it's hard to do anything different at this stage. If we were to go out and consult broadly on developing a new policy in the community, we'd receive a lot of community feedback. It's clear that this is an emotive issue. It's an emotive issue in two directions within the community. But the fact is, we'd be consulting to develop a policy against a shadow. There's not currently a Narrabri CSG proposal at foot in Gunnedah, nor is there currently other forms of conventional or unconventional gas or petroleum proposals or developments proposed for our shire. Effectively, we have a policy document that we should seek to advocate in the best interests of all in our community in any circumstance that a resource development is proposed. And I think that's excellent. I don't even think we need a policy to do so as a council. That's our role as an organisation, as an elected body, is to consult broadly within our community, consult on any issues or new developments that come up, and to advocate for the genuine best interests of all in our community. That's without a doubt, it goes without saying. And we currently have a policy document that looks at resource developments and forces, binds, compels us to do exactly so as a council. Effectively, I agree, we should have a coal seam gas policy. We do have one. We don't limit it to CSG. We extend it to all petroleum exploration, be it conventional, otherwise, CSG. We're not in West Texas, so no one's drilling for oil, but you get the idea. It's policy, it works, it's effective. Should any proposals come before our community, we should seek to use that framework to deal with them. I certainly believe that my fellow elected members should look favourably upon seeking to achieve what we're already trying to achieve as an organisation. And I don't think it's competing with the goals of the community that's presented to us, nor the goals of the community that hasn't presented to us tonight, which often stand up in favour and support of resource developments. I've talked long enough. Happy to hear from any others.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the amendment. Councillor Swain, as the seconder to the amendment, do you wish to speak to the amendment?
No, I don't think so. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor O'Keefe clearly identified that we already have a policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. Councillor Hasler, as the mover of the motion, I will afford you the opportunity to provide reply to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think Councillor O'Keefe summed up his proposed amendment very well. From my notes here, I was just a broad motherhood statement, and that's exactly what it is and what was perceived to be by this community. We want a policy that actually gives some leadership and direction for our community following the consultation with the community as we've done with so many other policies which we've developed in the council. Now, the fact that we've got a policy does not mean to say that we can't replace it. Of course, we're always reviewing policies. People sitting around this table would know that Councillor Luke next door, one of the first things that she wanted to do when she came on council was to have a dog-free area. We can't get a dog-free area because we're reviewing our occupations policy. So, you know, that's what happens. Policies get reviewed, and it's time we reviewed this policy and put in place a policy which has had good consultation with the community and truly reflects what the community are telling us at this time. In terms of course, it's a major issue, and it should be a major issue. And particularly for those people that are very likely to be directly affected. As the procedure says in the document by Merck, it says council should, as far as practicable, adopt a nil effect position in regard to the quality of surface water, domestic stock and irrigation aquifers used by our community, and as soon as practicable, a nil net effect on above ground environmental assets in relation to coal seam gas activities. These are the sort of clear, definitive policy points we need now in a 2020 policy which reflects what this community wants. Councillor O'Keefe referred to the fact that we don't have a proposal for our shire to have a policy. You know, I don't want to wait until it becomes very controversial and we have the sort of debate and the community conflict that we saw in our neighbouring council area. Let's not have that position. Let's try and get our community united as much as we can now, having a policy that we discuss and consult with, which we can utilise in any representations we have to make. So, okay, it's the role of us as an elected body to make the decisions. It is, once we've had that consultation and developed the policies, we don't make decisions without having a consultation. We're constantly telling our community how often, you know, we've had consultation on this and what we're doing as a result of that consultation process. I want that consultation. The people here this evening and our community generally, I think, wants us to have that consultation, particularly with such a potentially major issue. So let's have that conversation. Let's not be afraid to consult with our community, and let's come up with a policy that the majority of our community can adopt. I urge you to support the original and reject the amendment.
Councillor Hasler, thank you for your wide reply. Can I ask a clarification in your comment? So we currently have a policy, as we've heard. Are you saying that you don't agree with the policy needs changed?
I'm saying that policy is, to use Councillor O'Keefe's words, a broad motherhood statement, and yes, we need a policy which is clear and that is more definitive and which has been developed as a result of further consultation with the community. So it's a policy particularly related to coal seam gas.
Thank you. Councillors, we've had an amendment put, we've had two people speak to it, no one spoke against. Councillor Hasler has had his right to reply. So I'll now put the amendment, all in favour of the amendment, as you said before you, that reads that Kununurra Shire Council reaffirm its current policy position on any potential resource development within the Kununurra Shire. So I'll put that motion. All in favour? We have 4 for, against. We have 4 against. Unfortunately, I'm in the position of casting a vote once again, and I declare the amendment passed. Therefore, it becomes the motion. So now I'll put the motion. All in favour of the motion? All against? Declare. So I have the deciding vote. Declare the motion carried. Thank you. We'll now move forward on to the next, which is a question on notice that Councillor Hasler has brought forward, item 16.2. Could the General Manager or responsible officer please advise Council as to the progress and outcome including cost of the replacement of the hoist in the Gunnedah Pool complex, including what consultation has been undertaken with the Access Working Group and any other user group. So I'll refer to the General Manager to question those.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask Mr. Butler to address the question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The lift was replaced on the 4th of August 2020. This was reported at the September ordinary meeting in the resolution register update. The cost of the replacement was $7,800 against the allocated budget of $8,000. Direct consultation on the replacement of the lift did not occur with the Access Working Group or another user group. These groups were consulted in the development of the Disability Inclusion Action Plan, which is the overarching strategy endorsed by Council. Staff worked within the requirements of this plan to replace the lift with a product that is compliant with the relevant Australian standard. Notwithstanding this, feedback provided to staff was relayed to the manufacturer a number of times. The manufacturer kindly agreed to modify the lift in response to this feedback on 2 separate occasions at no additional cost to Council. The most recent of these modifications was agreed to on the 27th of October. Those modifications have been made and the lift has been returned to the pool this week.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett, for the clarification to the question on notice. Councillors, we now move into a closed meeting of Council. And I call on elected member to move that we suspend standard orders to move into closed council for the determination of items of confidential nature. Thank you, Councillor Moses, and seconded by Councillor Fuller. With that motion, all in favour? Against? With that motion carried. For those listening online, we're now moving